So recently, I was scrolling through my email like I do every morning when I plop down at this desk, and as I was scrolling through my email filled with people asking me to read their fanfics or rank their OCs or asking whether or not Shikamaru could beat Goku in a fight, I stumbled upon a rather professional-looking email. Now, this email was sent to me by a real estate marketer, who just happens to be a fan, but who emailed me from their own professional account. So I was like, this has gotta be spam. I don't need real estate in this economy. But as I read the email, I realized that this real estate marketer was actually trying to bring my attention to a theory, which are my favorite kind of emails. But here's the thing, usually when people reach out to me with a theory of theirs, I'm the one who will end up doing the majority of the research for the theory. People will simply email me an idea, like are Kakashi and Tobirama are related because they have the same color hair? And if I find that thought interesting, I'll be like, good idea, I'll do a deep dive on it. And then I'll spend an hour or so pulling together some points to make sure that that theory is as well-rounded and realistic as possible. But this email was different. See, this email wasn't sent by the person who created the theory. However, it was sent by a person who interacted with a theory that they had seen on Reddit. And as I had never made a video about this theory, they wanted to know what my opinion on this theory would be. So I popped on over to Reddit and I read this theory, which is in the r/Boruto Reddit page with over 500 upvotes. The fact that I'd never stumbled upon it was kind of crazy. However, not that crazy. Because here's the thing, this theory explores the concept of Amado's true identity. In essence, it's a theory explaining how Amado probably isn't who he says he is, which isn't a new theory. See, about 1 in 10 theory emails I get are, I think Amado is lying about his identity. And genuinely, I'm right there with you. I also believe that Amado's hiding his identity. However, the reason that I've never made a video about Amado's secret identity is because I can't seem to cobble together enough information that makes sense to prove that Amado isn't who he says he is. However, this theory on Reddit does have some compelling points, but I don't think this theory answers enough of my curiosities for it truly to be considered a theory that I stand by. See, this theory on Reddit, which is not my own, I want to make that very clear, was posted by the user BlackBook777 about 5 days ago as of the filming of this video. And this theory posits that Amado is in fact Shibai in disguise, which is also a thought that's been revolving around the Boruto community for a good amount of time. However, when it comes to compelling evidence being put forward for this theory, I must say that this post probably has the most. So I want to go through this theory with you, and I want to go over the points that I agree with and the points that I don't agree with, or at least the points that I believe that this theory doesn't address. And then I want to take the bones of this theory and project it in a way that I think makes a little bit more sense. And while I usually don't give you a rundown on what we're going to do in our theory videos, that's because 99% of the theories that we talk about are my own creation. But I don't want to try and sit here and act like all of the research that this person did was my own. But I have done some of my own research that I'm going to apply to the later end of this theory in order to try and make it make the most sense for me and possibly you. So with no further ado, let's get into, is Amado Shibai? But before we get into theorizing about anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me theorizing about your favorite anime, then you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime. And if you just love the idea of me talking about anime, you're gonna love my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And lastly, if you want to look like the weeb that we all know you are, go ahead and head to my brand new merch shop, otakusanonymous.net, where you can pick up everything from our Naruto political tees to our Sasuke plot armor gear. But before we talk about all that today, guys, first we gotta talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, HelloFresh. HelloFresh knows that we're all getting back into our routines now that it's fall. So HelloFresh wants to take some of the busy work out of your day. See, HelloFresh manages all the meal planning and the shopping so you can cook and get all the credit. They do the hard, tedious part, and you get to make delicious and easy to make meals. Not to mention with the fact that HelloFresh offers you over 40 options a week with 100 plus add-ons, your family and you will never get sick of what you cook up in the kitchen. But HelloFresh has a lot more than just dinner covered. You can stock your fridge with an easy breakfast, a quick lunch, or even some incredible snacks. All you gotta do is shop HelloFresh Market and you can stock your fridge with tasty, time-saving options. Listen, I love HelloFresh. Listen, I love cooking, but I hate meal prepping and grocery shopping. I don't want to think of recipes I want to cook this week and then decide, oh, I need 3 stalks of celery, but I can only get 6. But I still want to be able to prepare gorgeous, easy to cook, and delicious delicious meals for me and my loved ones, which is why I switched to HelloFresh almost 6 years ago. And not only does HelloFresh give me time so I can do the things that I love, like hang out with Dorothy and the dogs and make videos for you, but it was also instrumental in me losing 50 pounds in college. But I could talk all day about how much I love HelloFresh, but showing is a lot better than telling. So let's head down to the kitchen.
So today I'm cooking up some creamy dill pork fillets. And listen, this is a meal that might have intimidated me in the beginning of my journey with HelloFresh. I got my couscous toasting while I'm browning my pork fillets. I'm heating up my oven for some green beans and to finish off my pork fillets. And to have this many things going all at once in the early parts of my cooking career would have scared me a lot. But HelloFresh has given me the experience and the know-how in the kitchen to be able to crush situations like this and make beautiful and delicious meals like this with one to eat later. And not only does it look good, but it also tastes good.
So what are you guys waiting for? Go to HelloFresh.com and use code NCHammer2350 to get 50% off your first order today and free shipping. Yes, that's right. HelloFresh.com and use code NCHammer2350 at checkout to get 50% off your first order and free shipping. Whether it's saving time or getting in shape, HelloFresh has your back. So, I love theories. I love theories because theorizing makes you use your brain. It keeps you on edge. You read a manga or you watch an anime with your eyes wide open, looking for anything you can use to build out a theory later on. It makes you interact with the media that you're watching or reading so much more. Well, at the same time, theorizing requires a lot of realism, finding connections between the media you're watching and real-life themes, while also giving you a greater understanding of the person writing the story. Because if you understand the writer of the story and where they draw their references from, you can begin to understand what might happen down the line. And genuinely, when it comes to theorizing about stories written by Masashi Kishimoto, understanding him might be the most important thing. Because here's the thing, I hate to be that guy, but Masashi Kishimoto isn't the most original man on earth. You see, basically, everything in Naruto and Boruto is inspired by something else. Naruto is named after fish cake. Sasuke is named after a legendary shinobi in the Naruto universe, but Sasuke Sarutobi is actually a legendary ninja from Japan. Sakura is named after the color her hair is. And genuinely, those are some of the less blatant rips from Japanese mythology or other medias that Kishimoto put into Naruto. But at the same time, I am not upset about it. Obviously, Japanese folklore inspires tons of media, in the same way that Greek mythology inspires tons of media and Norse mythology inspires tons of media. There's nothing wrong with looking backward at your country's history and remixing it for some new fun tale. But by fully understanding that Masashi Kishimoto's stories are heavily influenced by Japanese mythology allows us not only understand the characters better, but also theorize where the story is gonna go. As often characters in Naruto who are named after characters from Japanese folklore undergo character arcs similar to, if not identical to, what they go through in Japanese mythology. So when you make a connection between a character in Naruto's name to a character in Japanese mythology, you can kind of estimate what's gonna happen to that character. And really, no category in Naruto is more heavily influenced by Japanese folklore than the Otsutsuki, especially in the naming of the Otsutsuki. See, Kaguya is probably the most famous example of a character being ripped from an old story in Japan. See, Kaguya being named Kaguya is actually a direct reference to a book called The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. See, The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter is what's referred to in Japan as a monogatari, which is essentially just a Japanese epic. And The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter is considered to be the oldest surviving monogatari, with the oldest dated manuscript dating back to 1592. However, sources estimate that because in this monogatari, Mount Fuji is still smoking, that the tale was written between 871 and 881, which is when Mount Fuji stopped smoking. But as basically the oldest story in Japan's history, it holds a massive amount of import to all of Japanese literature. And Kaguya in this story is a princess from the moon who is found within a glowing bamboo stalk. Does that sound familiar? Outside of Kaguya, every other Otsutsuki ties their name back to Japanese mythology, as Momoshiki, Kinshiki, Orishiki, and Ishiki all get their names from Japanese folk heroes, who instead of their name ending in Shiki, end in Taro. So that would be Momotaro Kintaro, Orishima Taro, and Isun Kotaro. Now, Taro means boy, so Momotaro is Peach Boy, Kintaro is Golden Boy, and each of these boys are folktale heroes from individual stories. Now, these boy stories don't exactly line up with the Otsutsukis that they're named after, as Momotaro's story is a boy who's found in the center of a giant peach. A couple find him, split open the peach to eat, but Momotaro comes out and says the gods have bestowed me upon you to be your child. And then Momotaro grows up to be incredibly strong and kill Oni, also known as demons. But the inspiration for the Otsutsuki's names does absolutely come from these folktale heroes. Even Hagoromo, Kaguya's son, directly translates to feather mantle, which is what Kaguya is given to wear when she's sent back to the moon at the end of the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. But the Otsutsuki aren't the only places that we see references to Japanese folk tales through the names of Naruto's characters, as all three of the legendary Sannin are actually characters from another book, Jiraiya Goketsu, also known as the Tale of the Gallant Jiraiya, which is a story about a monk who befriends and rides toads. So genuinely, if you study Japanese mythology, you can truly begin to understand where Masashi Kishimoto is going with his stories more often than not. Because when you've read the source material that he's basing his story off, it's pretty easy to figure out where the story's going. Now, the reason that this is important information is because of the name Shibai. See, if we consider all of the names in Naruto to be highly intentional, which we should, naming the Otsutsuki god, the strongest Otsutsuki in history, Shibai, is an interesting choice. See, because Shibai directly translates to play, or drama, or acting. Japanese is very similar to English, where one word can be used in a lot of different contexts. And thus, while Shibai can refer to acting, it can also refer to deceiving, which the word acting can also do in English, as you can say that somebody's acting is impeccable or that somebody's acting amiss. Now, this theory dictates that there's three possible reasons that Shibai Otsutsuki could be referred to as Shibai, with possibility A being that Shibai actually means theatrical or pompous, which could be a reference to Shibai's arrogance and hubris as he's the strongest entity in the universe, and thus he often acts theatrically or pompously because he knows he can't be injured by anybody else. So in this circumstance, his name being Shibai would be a reference to his arrogance. The second possibility that this theory dictates is that through Shibai's use of omnipotence, he is constantly altering people's memories and realities, and therefore, since he's constantly playing with people's memories and changing the world, he's putting on a false show. He's deceiving the world into believing a lie, which is very similar to what Ada did with Shibai's omnipotence power by granting Kawaki's wish. However, the third possibility is the possibility that most Boruto fans are hung up on, and that is that Shibai actually refers to the fact that Shibai is pretending or acting to be somebody that he's not, which a lot of people logically point at if they believe in this theory as Amado being the person deceiving, as Amado is not only privy to almost all of the information about the Otsutsuki, but is also decades ahead of some of the smartest scientists in all of Konoha, which makes a lot of people doubt that Amado is who he says he is. But is there any evidence to back up Shibai actually being Amado? Well, this character dictates that there actually is. See, this theory states that Shibai is not only a reference to acting or deceiving, but also a reference to a famous character in Japanese folklore by the name of Shibamon the Nuki, or Doniki, probably Doniki. See, Shibamon is a Bakkei Doniki, which is a yokai. Now, a yokai in Japanese mythology is a supernatural being, akin to a unicorn or a werewolf. And the Bakkei Doniki is not only a yokai, but specifically a yokai of a Taniki. Now, a Taniki is a Japanese raccoon dog. It's what Shukaku is based off of. And they actually exist. They're really cute. And Taniki are very popular in Japan. In fact, many small businesses will put Taniki statues outside of their front door, as it's believed that a fat Taniki statue outside of your front door is a symbol of wealth and brings luck in all things wealth and business. Now, Shibamon is considered amongst one of the three famous Taniki of Japan, and his tale is told in the legends of the Awaji Islands. Now, the Awaji Islands might be a place that you've actually heard of. They exist a little bit west of Osaka, and it's actually where the Naruto theme park in Japan is located. And this is because the Awaji Island is actually located alongside the Naruto Strait. So a couple of fun coincidences there. Now, this theory goes on to state that the story of Shibamon is told a couple of different ways, but that each story shares three main elements. That Shibamon disguises himself as a human, shares goods or knowledge with humans, and then is killed by a dog. Now, one of the ways that Shibamon's story is told, he disguises himself as a human and disguises leaves as gold and sells them to humans. But in actuality, he was just selling leaves. But at the same time, while deceiving humans with his gold leaves, he was doing kind deeds amongst the humans. Now, this is interesting, because in this telling of Shibamon's story, he's not only deceiving humans, but also helping them, which is very similar to what Amado could possibly be doing. Because while he is absolutely more likely than not deceiving Konoha, he also helped Konoha in their battle against Code and Ishiki, giving them crucial information on how to battle against both of them. And in this telling of Shibaimon becomes grief-stricken over the loss of his wife. And then once his cover is blown, he's killed by a dog. And the concept of Shibaimon becoming grief-stricken over the loss of somebody close to him also mirrors what's going on with Amado, as Amado states that his core motivation in everything is to bring his daughter Akebi back to life. Beyond this, in the Hyogo Prefecture, where this version of Shibaimon's story comes from, he was deified. That is to say, he was made a god of the theater, which makes a possible connection between Shibaimon and God, or the gods, which helps this theory when you consider the fact that Shibai Otsutsuki is referred to as the god of the Otsutsukis. And all of the tellings of Shibaimon's story tend to be somewhat similar to this, with just a couple of minor details changed. Like one of the tellings of Shibaimon's story specifically dictating that Shibaimon's human disguise was around 50 years old, which could hypothetically tie into Amado's presumed age. So with all of this in mind, the person writing this theory decided to come to some reasonable conclusions and some non-reasonable conclusions, which I respect. I have nothing but respect for this theory and how it was formulated. Somebody willing to put in the research to build a well fleshed out theory. One of the sexiest things on Earth. Now, the reasonable conclusions that this theorizer comes to are Shibaimon turning the leaves into gold and giving those to the humans is symbolically very similar to Amado coming to the hidden leaf and sharing his information that the leaf didn't have, turning the leaf into gold, which is just kind of a fancy way of saying what I stated earlier, that the connections between Amado and Shibaimon come through the form of deception and information. The second reasonable conclusion that they come to is the fact that Shibaimon is always killed by a dog. And this theory I like, but also don't love. See, because here's the thing. Kawaki is referred to as a stray dog by Ishiki/Jigen, who really likes that term, because outside of Kawaki being referred to as a stray dog by Ishiki/Jigen, Kashin Koji is also referred to as a stray dog. Specifically, after Kashin Koji uses summoning jutsu to get himself out of the battle against Ishiki, Ishiki states, "What is that purposeless stray dog going to do?" However, immediately after that, he does say, does he intend to go finish off Amado himself? Which, if we're using somebody being referred to as a dog as evidence that they'll be the person to kill Amado, I think Kashin Koji not only has substantially more motive, but has also been foreshadowed to be the person who's gonna do it. I mean, think about it. Kashin Koji found out from Ishiki that Amado created him specifically for the task of killing Jigen, and then Kashin Koji was tossed out, his purpose being completed. And that is 100% what Amado did to him. So if anybody has motivation to hunt down Amado and kill him and be the dog that takes him out, I believe it's Kashin Koji. Now, the other somewhat reasonable conclusions that this theory comes to are that Amado being Shibai would explain how Amado came across Shibai's remains, and more importantly, how Amado was able to transfer the DNA of Shibai into androids and give them the shinjutsus that they have, like Daemon's reflectability and Ada's omnipotence. In fact, Amado being Shibai would make a lot of sense when you consider everything he's been able to do. And if in fact Amado was Shibai and had omnipotence, he would be able to use omnipotence to figure out all of the things that seem somewhat impossible that he has figured out. And then the last somewhat reasonable conclusion that this theory comes to is that Amado has always been sus, so he's probably lying about something, and that something is more likely than not his identity. And I'm not going to go into the less reasonable conclusions because they're fine, but not really worth talking about. However, after the less reasonable conclusions, there's 2 paragraphs left, one of which I do want to talk about. See, the second to last paragraph says that in the Ihon Hyaku Monogatari, there is an alternate version of the connection between Shibai and Amado that doesn't rely on Amado being Shibai, where instead of Amado being the person who gets his throat bitten out by a dog, that Amado is actually the peasant receiving information from Shibaimon, which could point to the possibility that Shibai and Amado came into contact once and Shibai gave information to Amado in exchange for something, which could point towards a couple of things. But the most important of which being the possibility that Amado actually bears the karma marking of Shibai. And while I think this line of logic is good and possibly heading in the somewhat right direction, I have to ask this entire theory the question, why? See, when building a theory, the most important question you have to ask is why? Why would any of this happen? Why would this character be motivated to do this in the first place? And in this circumstance, we have to ask the question, why would Shibai need to disguise himself and live amongst the humans? Why would Shibai, a supposed god of the Otsutsuki, need help in a battle against Ishiki? For that matter, why would Shibai want Ishiki dead in the first place? See, if Shibai is truly a never-ending entity of pure power that achieved such heights of power that he was able to transcend a physical body and go exist in a dimension of his own, why would he remain on Earth? Why wouldn't he go be in his dimension? And more importantly than not, why would he live in subservience to not only other humans, but also other Otsutsuki? As we know, the Otsutsuki, especially the upper-ranking Otsutsuki, are incredibly prideful. So living in subservience to Ishiki, building code, and then getting bullied by code, living at the whim of Konoha and humans, all seems a bit weird for Shibai. And while this theory does explore some interesting possible connections between Amado and Shibai, it doesn't answer these questions. And without answering these questions, you don't really have a theory, you just have points. See, in order for Shibai to be in a situation where he would have to live as a human in subservience to other humans and other Otsutsuki, he would have had to lose all his power. But that directly contradicts basically everything we know about Shibai, as we were told that the only reason that Shibai's body was on Earth is because he acquired a certain amount of strength that allowed him to abandon a physical body. And what's worse is this information wasn't even conveyed to us by Amado. The vast majority of what we know about Shibai was actually told to us by Momoshiki, who, so far as we know, would have no real reason to lie for Amado, especially when you consider the fact that lying for Amado, who is supposedly Shibai, and we're assuming in the circumstance that Momoshiki knows that Amado is Shibai, would give Shibai a substantially better chance at consuming the chakra fruit created from the earth, something that Momoshiki wants to do for himself. Not to mention, if Momoshiki knew that Shibai was Amado, he would have fed Amado to the Ten Tails. So we can pretty much all but rule out Momoshiki knowing that Shibai is Amado, which pretty much confirms that anything we learned about Shibai from Momoshiki, at the very least, Momoshiki believes. But Amado is suspicious and weirdly connected to Shibai, and thus my theory, the answer to the why that this theory brings forward, isn't that Amado is Shibai, but instead Shibai's lower rank. Stick with me here. See, obviously me saying that Amado is Shibai's lower rank brings up a couple of problems. One, Shibai's been dead for supposedly thousands of years, which would mean that Amado would have to be thousands of years old. Now, the reason that Amado would have to be thousands of years old, because really the only way that this theory works out is that after being fed to the Ten Tails that created the God Fruit that ascended Shibai out of his physical form, Shibai's lower-ranking Otsutsuki went through karmic rebirth, which I'm just now realizing. Karma marking leads to rebirth. Karma is how you get rebirthed in Buddhism. It's another connection. My man cannot think of names for himself. But let's say hypothetically on this last planet that Shibai consumed the chakra fruit of, that his lower-ranking Otsutsuki had to plant a karma marking on somebody to make sure that after the world was devoured that he would be able to come back to life. Or at least prior to consuming that last chakra fruit, his lower-ranking Otsutsuki placed a karma marking on somebody else. Now, usually the way that this would work is that the moment that the lower-ranking Otsutsuki was fed to the Ten Tails and died, it would simply be reborn through the body of the person they put a karma marking on. However, we have seen multiple times, mind you, that that's not a foolproof system, as both Boruto and Jigen were able to bear karma markings that never ended in a true reincarnation. And this is either because they died before they reached 100% Otsutsufication, like in Boruto's case, or the karma marking connectivity wasn't at 100% and therefore a manifestation couldn't be made, like in the case of Jigen. However, Jigen is kind of our case study in this circumstance, because we know that after Kaguya jumped Ishiki and tore him asunder, that Ishiki floated into Jigen's ear and attached himself to Jigen's brain. Now, considering the fact that Kaguya existed on Earth 2,000 years ago, this means that Jigen is well over 2,000 years old, which shows that even a non-compatible karma vessel can live for thousands of years. And thus the theory that I have is that after being fed to the Ten Tails that created the chakra fruit that ascended Shibai to another dimension, the lower-ranking Otsutsuki, which we'll refer to as Amado, realized that it didn't have 100% karma compatibility, and thus couldn't truly manifest through Amado's body. One, this would explain why Amado knew so much about the Otsutsuki and knew where Shibai's body was. It would also explain why Amado was able to implant Shibai's Shinjutsu into the cyborgs. Because mind you, the Otsutsuki on the moon, Toneri, and all of the other Otsutsuki who lived on the moon, had completely sentient, mind-controlled puppets that they didn't need to use puppet ninjutsu on. So creating cyborg sentient life for the Otsutsuki is kind of commonplace. And implanting abilities into these cyborgs wouldn't be that difficult. I mean, sorcery figured it out. And thus, what if the real reason that Amado wants Kawaki to upload his daughter's genetic information onto code isn't actually about Amado's daughter. And it's actually Amado trying to get Kawaki to upload the lower-ranking Otsutsuki's DNA onto Code so the lower-ranking Otsutsuki can manifest through Code's body. And thus, in actuality, the story of Akebi is fake, and the lower-ranking Otsutsuki is simply trying to trick those around him to help him manifest in a suitable vessel. Or in the circumstance of believing that Amado is the peasant who the information was shared with, that Amado offered up his body to the lower-ranking Otsutsuki in exchange that the lower-ranking Otsutsuki would one day save his daughter. And therefore, Amado has a deal with the Otsutsuki who lives inside of him that if Amado is able to get his karma marking onto Code and allow him to manifest through Code, that the lower-ranking Otsutsuki will bring back Amado's daughter.
Nick, you're ignoring one key problem here.
Nothing about this theory has anything to do with Shibai's name meaning play or deceive. You're right, but that's because I subscribe to possibility B in this theory. That is that Shibai's power of omnipotence allows him to play with the memories of people and show them a play or a deception that they all believe, instead of referring to Shibai as a deceptive name to say that Shibai is hiding amongst the humans. Because everything that we currently know about Shibai points to the fact that he would have no reason to do that. But what do you guys think? Do you believe that Amado is hiding something? And if you do, what do you believe he's hiding? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I'm watching a Korean TV show on Netflix right now. It's called Bloodhounds. It's really good, but they're always yelling Shibai. So like now I just have that stuck in my head.